Let's get real. Most people don't have the guts to tell you straight up that they don't like you. Instead, they hide behind fake smiles, shallow compliments, and forced politeness. I've been there, thinking someone was a friend, only to realize they were quietly hoping for my failure. It's harsh, but if you don't recognize the signs, you'll waste time and energy on people who don't get you, don't appreciate you, and definitely don't have your best interests at heart. So let's cut through the BS and talk about the signs someone dislikes you but is hiding it. You might not want to hear this, but trust me, it's better to face the truth than live in denial. Number 1. They're always joking about your flaws. We all know that one person who just loves to joke around, especially when the joke is at your expense. They'll pick at your quirks, your mistakes, or your insecurities, always with a smile and a casual, "I'm just messing with you." At first glance, it seems harmless, but let's not sugarcoat it. These jokes are rarely innocent. They're often subtle jabs, carefully cloaked in humor, designed to chip away at your confidence bit by bit. I remember a time when I was close to someone who always had something to say about me, whether it was my clothes, how I spoke, or even the projects I was working on. They found a way to make it into a joke. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was all in good fun. But after a while, I noticed the pattern. Their jokes were never about my strengths, always my weaknesses, my supposed flaws. It didn't take long before I started questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was the problem, if these imperfections were as glaring as they made them out to be. And here's where the truth stings. People who consistently joke about your flaws aren't doing it out of love. They're testing you, seeing how much disrespect you'll tolerate. It's a subtle form of manipulation, a way to assert dominance while keeping you in check. They're telling you, without ever saying it directly, that you're beneath them. And the worst part? They get away with it, because we've been conditioned to believe that if we can't take a joke, we're the ones with the issue. But let's flip the script. There's nothing wrong with standing up for yourself when a joke crosses the line. In fact, it's essential. You deserve to be surrounded by people who lift you up, not those who tear you down for a cheap laugh. True friends don't need to point out your flaws to feel better about themselves. They celebrate your strengths and help you work through your weaknesses without making you the punchline. I've seen it happen time and again. People let these jokes slide, thinking it's easier to avoid conflict than to speak up. But here's the cold truth. Allowing others to disrespect you, even as a joke, is a slippery slope. It starts with a few small comments, but over time these digs can wear you down. They make you second-guess your worth, and the more you let it slide, the more they push until you're left questioning yourself, all because you didn't want to seem too sensitive. I had to learn this the hard way. For the longest time, I laughed along, thinking I was just keeping the peace. But I wasn't by laughing. I was giving them permission to keep going. I was complicit in my own disrespect. It wasn't until I started pushing back and setting boundaries that things changed. Not just in how they treated me, but in how I saw myself. I stopped letting their words define me, and I started owning my narrative. So here's my advice. The next time someone makes a joke at your expense, don't just brush it off. Ask yourself, is this really funny, or is there something more going on here? And if the answer is the latter, don't be afraid to call them out. Yes, it might be uncomfortable, and yes, it could end the friendship. But your self-respect is worth infinitely more than someone else's misguided sense of humor. At the end of the day, life is too short to surround yourself with people who can't see your value. If their version of friendship is constantly pointing out your flaws, it's time to move on. The people who truly care about you will never need to put you down to feel good about themselves. So stand tall, speak up, and don't let anyone reduce you to a punchline. Number 2, they give compliments that sting like insults. We've all experienced at that moment when someone offers a compliment, but instead of feeling uplifted, you're left with a bitter aftertaste, like you've just been slapped with a velvet glove. It's the kind of remark that makes you pause and wonder, wait, was that a compliment or an insult? The harsh reality is that more often than not, it's a bit of both. These backhanded compliments are a subtle, almost sneaky way for people to undermine you while pretending to be kind. I remember a particular instance when I was working on a big project, something I had poured my heart and soul into. After weeks of dedication, I finally shared it with a group of colleagues. One of them, someone I had considered a supporter, smiled and said, "Wow, this is actually pretty good for someone like you." I stood there stunned. On the surface, it seemed like a compliment, but those final words, "for someone like you," hit me like a ton of bricks. What did that even mean? Was I not supposed to be capable of producing good work? And that's where the real problem lies. These so-called compliments are laced with hidden agendas. They're not intended to lift you up. They're designed to remind you of your place. It's a power play, a way for the person giving the compliment to assert their superiority while making you question your own abilities. Essentially, they're saying, "I see you trying, but you'll never be as good as me." It's toxic, but because it's wrapped in a pretty package, it's easy to miss the venom inside. Here's the deeper truth. People who give backhanded compliments are often insecure themselves. They see your potential and strengths, and that scares them. So they use these sly little digs to make you second-guess yourself, to ensure you don't rise too high. It's like they're patting you on the back while pushing you down with the other hand. But here's where it gets even more interesting. We've all done this at some point. Maybe not intentionally, but we've all let our insecurities slip out as a compliment that was really meant to remind someone of their place. The important thing is recognizing it for what it is and learning from it. The key message here: you don't have to accept this disguised hostility. You have the power to reject it, to see it for what it truly is, a reflection of their own insecurities, not a measure of your worth. When someone says, "You're smarter than you look," or "This is good, considering you're new at this," you don't have to smile and swallow it whole. Call it out. Even if it makes things awkward, call it out. Because if you don't, you're letting them dictate how you see yourself. And that's a power you should never hand over to anyone. I've learned to recognize these compliments for what they are: mirrors reflecting someone else's fears and insecurities. When you see them that way, they lose their sting. Instead of internalizing them, you can almost laugh them off. After all, their words reveal more about them than they ever will about you. So, here's what I do now. When I receive a backhanded compliment, I don't let it slide. I'll say something like, "Thanks, but what do you mean by that?" It forces them to confront the insult hidden in their words. More often than not, it puts them on the spot. Suddenly, they realize you're not playing their game, and it's amazing how quickly their tone changes. The takeaway? Don't let anyone's veiled negativity define you. Whether it's from a well-meaning friend, a jealous colleague, or even a family member. Remember this: your worth isn't up for debate. Compliments should uplift, not tear down. If someone's words leave you questioning yourself, it's time to question their intentions instead. Life is too short to waste on people who can't genuinely celebrate your success. Surround yourself with those who see your value and aren't afraid to let you know it, without any hidden barbs attached. Number 3. They subtly exclude you from plans. It's the little things that sting the most, like realizing your so-called friends accidentally forgot to invite you to that dinner, party, or weekend getaway. They'll swear it was an oversight, claim it was a last-minute thing, or worse, they'll assume you were too busy anyway. But, let's be honest, these aren't accidents. This is social exclusion in its most subtle form, and it's a clear sign that you're not as valued as you think. I've been there more times than I'd like to admit. I remember one weekend checking my phone and seeing photos of a group of friends having a blast at an event I would have loved to attend. The kicker? Not a single person mentioned it to me beforehand. When I casually brought it up later, they were full of excuses. "Oh, we thought you were busy," or "it was so last minute." But deep down, I knew the truth. If they'd wanted me there, they would have made sure I knew about it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. This kind of exclusion isn't just thoughtlessness. It's deliberate. It's a way of sending a message without having to say a word. They don't want you there, but they don't have the courage to tell you directly. Instead, they hope you'll just fade out quietly without causing a scene. It's passive-aggressive and, frankly, cowardly, but it's also incredibly common. Most people don't talk about this kind of exclusion because it's easier to pretend it's not happening. It's easier to swallow the excuses, to convince yourself it really was just an innocent mistake, rather than face the painful truth that you're being pushed out. But here's the deal. If you keep accepting those excuses, you're giving them permission to keep excluding you. You're allowing them to decide your place in their lives instead of taking control of your own narrative. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. For a while, I stayed quiet, letting those accidental exclusions slide, hoping that maybe next time I'd be included. But then it hit me. By staying silent, I was allowing myself to be treated like an afterthought. So I did something uncomfortable, something that changed the game. I started calling them out. I'd say things like, "Hey, I saw you guys went out last weekend. Why didn't anyone invite me?" It wasn't easy, and it definitely made things awkward. But it also forced them to confront their behavior. And guess what? The dynamics changed. Some got defensive, others tried to make amends. But the bottom line was clear. I wasn't going to let them exclude me without a fight. Here's the deep message. If people want you in their lives, they'll make the effort to include you, no matter how last minute the plan is. And if they don't, then it's time to reconsider the value of those relationships. You deserve to be around people who don't make you feel like you're constantly chasing their approval or attention. True friends don't forget to invite you. They make sure you're there because they genuinely enjoy your company. So, if you find yourself being subtly excluded from plans, don't just brush it off. Confront it. Ask the hard questions and be prepared for the answers, even if they're not what you want to hear. Because at the end of the day, it's better to know where you truly stand than to keep wondering why you were left out again. And remember, you're not a backup option. You're a priority. Surround yourself with people who treat you like one. Number 4, they disappear when you need support. Let's be real. Nothing reveals the true nature of a relationship quite like a crisis. When things get tough, you discover who your real friends are. So what does it mean when someone vanishes the moment you need them most? It's not just a sign of flakiness. It's a glaring warning that they might not be as invested in you as you thought. And let's face it, when someone pulls a disappearing act during your darkest hours, it's not just hurtful. It's a betrayal. I learned this the hard way during a particularly challenging period in my life. I was dealing with a major personal issue, something that really shook me to my core. Naturally, I turned to the people I considered close friends, expecting at least some level of support, even if it was just a text or a quick call. But guess what? Crickets. The people I thought would be there for me suddenly had every excuse in the book. I'm so swamped at work. Sorry, I'm just really busy right now. Or I'll check in with you later. Spoiler alert, they never did. Here's where it gets controversial. People love to talk about how they'll always be there for you, but when push comes to shove, many are only around for the good times. They'll party with you, laugh with you, and enjoy the high points of your life. But the minute things get real, they're nowhere to be found. It's easier for them to ghost you than to deal with your pain or discomfort. They don't want to be dragged into your problems because, deep down, they don't care enough to be there when it truly counts. Let's be brutally honest. True support isn't about convenience. It's about being there when it's hard, when it's uncomfortable, and when it's the last thing you want to do. The people who disappear when you need them most aren't just being inconsiderate. They're showing you exactly where you stand in their life. They're saying, without words, that your problems aren't worth their time. I remember feeling absolutely devastated when I realized that the people I had been there for during their own struggles, be it breakups, family dramas, or career setbacks, couldn't be bothered to return the favor. It was a wake-up call, and not a pleasant one, but it was a lesson I needed to learn. Not everyone who smiles in your face is truly in your corner. Here's the deeper message. Support is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. It's easy to be around when everything's going well, but the real test of a relationship is how people respond when things fall apart. If someone disappears the moment you need them, they're not just failing you, they're showing you that they were never really there in the first place. But don't let their absence make you bitter. Let it make you better. Use it as a filter to sift out the people who don't deserve a place in your life. The ones who stick around, who check in, who show up even when it's inconvenient. Those are the people who truly matter. And those are the relationships you should nurture and cherish. Life is too short to invest in fair-weather friends. Surround yourself with people who will stand by you in the storm, not just bask in the sunshine. When you find those rare individuals who stick around when the chips are down, you found something worth holding on to. As for those who disappear, let them go. They've already shown you their true colors. Number 5. They gossip about you behind your back. Gossip is the social poison that spreads faster than wildfire and can burn down relationships in an instant. The thing about gossip is that it's never as innocent as people make it out to be. When someone you consider a friend talks behind your back, they're not just sharing a harmless story. They're actively sabotaging your trust, your reputation, and your relationship. Let's be real. When someone gossips about you, it's a clear sign they don't respect you, no matter how friendly they act to your face. I've been the subject of gossip before, and let me tell you, it's one of the most gut-wrenching experiences. There was a time when I confided in someone I thought was a close friend about a personal issue I needed to unload. I trusted this person to keep it between us, but within days, details of that conversation started circulating, twisted and exaggerated. It was like a game of telephone, except the message wasn't just getting lost. It was being weaponized against me. The person I trusted had turned my vulnerability into entertainment for others. Here's the controversial truth. People who gossip about you aren't just venting or sharing concerns, they're playing a power game. Gossip is a way for them to elevate themselves, while putting you down, all without having to confront you directly. It's cowardly, manipulative, and toxic. They're not just damaging your reputation, they're undermining the very foundation of trust that any real relationship is built on. Let's get one thing straight. People who gossip about others to you will gossip about you to others. It's a pattern, not a one-time thing. I've seen it happen too many times to count. Someone who loves to spill the tea on everyone else suddenly goes quiet when they're around you. Guess what? They're probably spilling your tea when you're not around. It's a betrayal of the worst kind because it's done in the shadows without giving you a chance to defend yourself or even know what's being said. Now here's where it gets really personal. I remember confronting the friend who gossiped about me, expecting some sort of apology or at least an explanation. Instead, they acted like it was no big deal, brushing it off as just a bit of harmless talk. But here's the thing. Gossip is never harmless. It's a betrayal, plain and simple, and it says far more about the person spreading it than it does about the person it's about. Number 6, they're busy when it comes to you. We've all heard it before. I'm so busy these days, sorry I can't hang out. It's the perfect excuse. After all, who isn't busy these days? But what happens when you notice a pattern? They're always available for others, posting pictures of their outings, catching up with mutual friends. But when it comes to you, suddenly they're swamped. Here's the harsh truth. They're not too busy. They're just too busy for you. I've been in that frustrating situation more times than I'd like to admit. I remember reaching out to a friend I used to be close with, trying to set up a time to catch up. Every time I suggested something, they'd have an excuse. I'm working late, I've got a lot on my plate, or maybe next week. Meanwhile, I'd see them hanging out with other people, having a great time, always managing to make time for everyone except me. It took me longer than I'd like to admit to see the pattern. The message they were sending was loud and clear. I wasn't a priority in their life anymore. Here's where the controversy comes in. We've been conditioned to accept busy as a valid reason for being pushed aside. But let's be honest. People make time for what and who they care about. If they're constantly too busy for you, it's not about their schedule. It's about their priorities. And that's a tough pill to swallow because it forces you to face the reality that you might not be as important to them as they are to you. The harsh reality is that busy is often a polite way of saying, I don't want to spend time with you. It's easier for them to blame their schedule than to admit that they're choosing not to include you in their life. It's a passive-aggressive way of keeping you at arm's length without having to confront you directly. They want to keep you on the hook just in case, without actually investing in the relationship. I've been on both sides of this. There were times when I made excuses because I didn't know how to tell someone that I'd outgrown the friendship. But being on the receiving end taught me a valuable lesson. It's better to be honest, even if it's uncomfortable, than to string someone along with excuses. When I finally called out my friend on always being too busy, the conversation was awkward but necessary. It gave me the clarity I needed to move on and invest my time and energy in relationships where I was truly valued. Here's the deeper message. Your time and energy are precious, and you shouldn't waste them on people who can't be bothered to make time for you. If someone is constantly too busy for you, it's time to reassess the relationship. You deserve to be around people who are excited to see you, who make an effort to include you in their lives. Not just when it's convenient for them, but because they genuinely enjoy your company. It's important to recognize that people change, and so do relationships. Sometimes we cling to people out of habit, nostalgia, or fear of being alone, even when they've clearly moved on. But there's strength in letting go, in acknowledging that you deserve more than someone's leftover time. It's not about being needy or demanding. It's about valuing yourself enough to walk away from those who don't value you. Number 7, they avoid physical contact like the plague. Let's address the elephant in the room: physical contact, or rather the lack of it. Physical contact is a fundamental part of human interaction, a way of connecting and building trust. So what does it mean when someone goes out of their way to avoid even the most casual touch? The answer isn't pretty. They're sending a clear signal that they're uncomfortable around you, and it's time to pay attention. I once had a colleague who seemed to recoil every time I reached out for a handshake or a friendly pat on the back. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then I noticed it wasn't just me. They were warm and tactile with everyone else. But when it came to me, it was as if I had the plague. It didn't take long to realize that their avoidance of physical contact was more than just a quirk. It was a deliberate effort to keep me at a distance. Here's the controversial part. Physical contact is a natural part of human interaction, and when someone consistently avoids it, they're communicating a lack of comfort or connection with you. Sure, some people aren't touchy-feely, and that's okay. But when the avoidance is selective, when they're fine hugging others but stiffen up around you, it's a red flag that something's off. They might not dislike you enough to say it outright, but their body language is doing all the talking. Let's be honest. We've all been on both sides of this equation. Maybe you've avoided a handshake or leaned back when someone got too close because you just weren't feeling the vibe. Or maybe you've been on the receiving end, wondering why someone always seems to flinch when you're around. It's uncomfortable, awkward, and often a sign that the relationship isn't as strong as you'd like to think. But here's the deeper truth. Physical contact is fundamental to human connection. It's how we show trust, warmth, and empathy. When someone avoids it with you, they're not just avoiding touch, they're avoiding closeness, intimacy, and vulnerability. They're keeping you at arm's length, both literally and figuratively. This is a clear indication that there's an underlying issue in the relationship. I've learned to pay attention to these cues, even when it's hard to admit what they mean. There was a time when I ignored the signs, convincing myself that someone's reluctance to get close was just a personality trait. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized it was about me and our relationship. When I finally confronted the situation, it led to some tough conversations and, in some cases, the end of the relationship. But it also freed me from the frustration of wondering why things felt off. Here's the deep message. Don't ignore the signs when someone avoids physical contact with you. It's more than just a preference. It's a statement about their level of comfort and connection with you. If you notice this pattern, don't be afraid to address it. It might lead to a deeper understanding or reveal that the relationship isn't as solid as you thought. Either way, it's better to confront the truth than to live in denial. Remember, you deserve relationships where physical contact isn't something to be avoided, but something that happens naturally and comfortably. Whether it's a friendly hug, a handshake, or just sitting close without feeling awkward. These small gestures build trust and connection. If someone consistently avoids them, it's a sign that something's not right. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions, and, if necessary, make the tough decisions. Life's too short to be surrounded by people who keep you at a distance, both literally and figuratively.